Look closely. This isn't just an eye. It's a surveillance system. It belongs to a man who hasn't slept in 30 years because he believes the walls are breathing his secrets. This painting is the most controversial image in Russian history. It's been slashed, banned, and debated for a century. Why? Because it captures the exact moment power realizes it is powerless. 1581. The Kremlin. A father strikes his son. A Tsar strikes his heir. A dynasty strikes its own heart. But why did the most powerful man on earth commit the ultimate act of self-sabotage? To understand the murder, we don't look at the staff he used. We look at the chemistry of his brain. Today, we dissect the psyche of power, Ivan the Terrible. Forget the terrible label. In Russian, Grozny means formidable or awe-inspiring. He was a genius, a theologian, and a psychopath. The question is, which one pulled the trigger? Our story begins in a basement. Ivan was 8 when his mother died, likely poisoned. For years, the boyars, the elite lords, treated the boy, king, like a stray dog. Psychologists call this the malignant narcissism seed. When a child is stripped of agency, they often regain it through the only thing they can control, the life and death of creatures smaller than them. At 17, he crowned himself Tsar, Caesar. He didn't want to just lead. He wanted to be the interface between God and man. This is the birth of the God complex. Ivan's life was a pendulum between extreme piety and extreme cruelty. He would pray for 10 hours, then watch executions for 5. This isn't just crazy. This is cognitive dissonance as a lifestyle. There was an anchor, his first wife.
Honesty.
For 13 years, she was the only person who could calm the storm in his amygdala. She was his externalized empathy. When she died, Ivan didn't just lose a wife. He lost his grip on reality. He convinced himself the boyars had poisoned her. And that's when the terrible truly began. He created the Oprichnina, the world's first state-sponsored terror squad. Their symbol, a dog's head to bite enemies and a broom to sweep them away. This leads us to our first cognitive reversal. Most people think Ivan's cruelty was about controlling others. It wasn't. It was about controlling his own fear. Let's look at the hyper-vigilance loop. When you are constantly under threat, your brain stays in a permanent fight or flight state. Over decades, this physically shrinks the prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic and impulse control. Ivan wasn't just a tyrant. He was a victim of his own biology. His brain had become a fortress where every guest was an assassin. Now, let's talk about the son, Ivan. He was the second son, the heir, the spitting image of his father. This is where we introduce our first deep psychological concept of Girard's mimetic theory. Girard argued that human desire is not original. We want what others want. But when two people want the same absolute thing, total power, they become monstrous doubles. Ivan didn't see a successor. He saw a mirror. And in that mirror, he saw his own replacement. The son's success was the father's expiration date. Science calls this the winner effect in biology. Winners get a dopamine and testosterone surge. But if that surge is maintained for decades, it becomes neurotoxic. It leads to an inability to perceive risk and a pathological need to crush rivals. To the Tsar, his son was no longer family. He was a biological competitor. The stage for the murder wasn't set in 1581. It was set in the very chemistry of absolute rule. But wait, there's a twist. Ivan loved his son. He had trained him, shared his secrets with him. This wasn't a cold-blooded execution. It was an explosion. November 15, 1581. The spark. Ivan encounters his daughter-in-law, Yelena, in the palace. He deems her dress immodest. He begins to beat her. This is a man who thinks he owns the modesty of every woman in Russia. He is the moral police, the judge, and the executioner. The son enters. He defends his wife. He defies the Tsar. For the first time in his life, the second son eclipses the first. Cognitive reversal fatu. This wasn't a fight about a dress. This was a stress-induced regression. In nature, when an alpha male is challenged by a younger male, the higher brain shuts down. The reptilian brain takes over. It's called an amygdala hijack. In that split second, Ivan IV didn't see his heir. He saw the boyars who bullied him. He saw the assassins who poisoned his wife. He saw every threat he had ever faced. Tsar, the sound of a dynasty breaking. The silence that follows a scream is the loudest sound in the world. The amygdala hijack ends as fast as it begins. The prefrontal cortex comes back online. Logic returns. But logic is now a torture chamber. May I be accursed! I have killed my son. I have killed my son, he wailed. But why does the brain do this? Why does it destroy what it values most? Consider the intermittent reinforcement of power experiment. When a subject is given total control, they lose the ability to predict the consequences of their own aggression. They become power blind. The son lived for 3 days. 3 days of Ivan praying, crying, and begging God for a miracle he knew he didn't deserve. The son died on November 19, and with him, the future of the Rurikid dynasty. But here is the hardcore truth. Ivan's grief wasn't just for his son. It was for his own legacy. This is narcissistic extension. To a narcissist, children aren't people. They are versions of the self. Ivan didn't just kill a person. He murdered his own immortality. This led to the time of troubles, civil war, famine, and the end of his line. All because of 1 second of unmanaged neurochemistry. Ivan is the textbook definition of the dark triad, but history usually ignores the fourth element, epigenetic trauma. Scientists now know that extreme stress can leave chemical marks on genes. Ivan's ancestors survived the Mongol yoki, centuries of brutal, submissive fear. Ivan was born with a brain already wired for a war that had ended centuries ago. He was a biological weapon designed for survival, trying to live in a time of governance. Cognitive reversal fun 3. We think power makes you a god. In reality, power makes you a prisoner of your own worst instincts. Absolute power is a biological trap. Without the friction of someone saying, no, the brain loses its calibration. It overcorrects until it destroys itself. Ivan spent his final years in a state of living death. He wandered the palace at night, talking to ghosts. He died while playing chess, a game of strategy, a game he had already lost the moment he picked up that staff. So, what does this mean for us, the 21st century viewers? Are we so different from the Tsar? We live in an era of micro-powers. We have total control over our digital domains, our social feeds. We are all czars of our own small screens. Do you feel that surge of dopamine when you crush a rival online? That's the winner effect at work. That's the ghost of Ivan in your synapses. Nietzsche warned us, but he didn't have an MRI machine. Today, we know the monster isn't a person. The monster is a neurological state. It's what happens when empathy is bypassed by the pursuit of absolute certainty. Ivan's tragedy is the ultimate cautionary tale of the Psyche of Power. The walls of the Kremlin didn't just protect the Tsar. They isolated him until his only reality was his own paranoia. Power doesn't corrupt, power reveals. And what it revealed in Ivan was a man who was terrified of his own shadow. Look at the son's hand. He's not pushing his father away. He's holding on to him, even in death. The son is the only thing keeping the father grounded. This is the paradox. We need others to keep us human. Without a second son, the first son only burns. Ivan was the prototype, the first to show that the cost of absolute authority is the destruction of the person holding it. There is a term in psychology called radical acceptance. Ivan could never accept his own vulnerability. And so, he created a world of iron. Iron breaks, flesh heals, but only if it's allowed to feel. For centuries, Russia has lived in the shadow of this father-son conflict, a cycle of strong men and shattered heirs. Is it possible to break the cycle, to balance power with the psyche? That is the challenge of the human condition, to lead without losing the capacity to love. Ivan died a broken man, not because he lost a war, but because he won the war against his own heart. The difference between a tyrant and a father is the ability to see the son as a person, not a project. Power is a drug, and like any drug, the higher the dose, the more it kills the user's humanity. We are the architects of our own neural pathways. Every choice we make, towards empathy or towards dominance, rewires who we are. Ivan left behind a vast empire and a void where a family should have been. History remembers the terrible, but psychology remembers the terrified. We've seen the childhood, the rise, the trauma, the murder, and the decay. This is why we study the past, not to memorize dates, but to recognize the patterns of our own minds. The sun sets on the Rurikids. The shadows it leaves are long. We are drawn to this image because it is the ultimate what if. History is made of what ifs. Psychology is made of why nots. Next time you feel that flash of God-like rage, remember the man in the Kremlin. Remember the price of being Grozny. To master power, you must first master yourself. Anything else is just a slow motion suicide. Ivan the Terrible didn't kill his son. The Tsar killed the father. If you want to understand the hidden forces that drive history, stay with us. We don't just tell stories. We decode the human soul. This is Psyche of Power. Don't let the crown crush the brain. See you in the next deep dive. Stay sharp, stay human.